Geek. Talking baseball every week. 'Cause they're Gleeman and the Geek.
And welcome to Gleeman and the Geek. Maybe the Comcast Bally's dispute isn't so bad after all edition. I am John Bonos of Twins Daily. With me here in Gleeman and the Athletic.
Yeah, we got
one effing run, Mr. Gleeman. One effing run.
Yeah, well, that's bad, but like Jeffers hit a leadoff homer in game one.
I know.
So they essentially got shut out for 3 games. They made 9 innings worth of outs consecutively without scoring
you're
3
right.
times.
You're right.
That's really difficult to do. I'm sure it's happened before, but that's really hard to do.
That is a crazy good lineup the Yankees have there. Or that 2 through 5.
Aaron Judge is really good.
Very good. And then you got Soto there. Jeez.
Yeah. And really, though, I would say over the last, I can read the usual collection of numbers about the Yankees and the Twins. Maybe I will. I don't know. It's good to update it always. It's for the public record.
I don't know that it's good.
No, you
can skip that part.
You can do earmuffs, John. It's okay. We're about accuracy and journalism on this show.
Yeah.
And misery, among other things. But I guess over the 22 years of the Yankees demolishing the Twins since 2002, basically, since Gardner took over for Kelly, I would say most of there's been all kinds of losses. They've lost 120 times or something like that. There's been all kinds of losses. But if I had to characterize the most common losses, there's 3 versions. 1, you lose by giving up a bunch of runs.
Okay.
2, you lose by not scoring any runs. And 3, you lose a close game either way. I would say in order, number 1, most common, Yankees, Twins. Twins have lost by giving up a bunch of runs.
Okay.
I mean, they had some games where the Yankees just scored 10 on them.
Absolutely.
And it was just a disaster. Number 2, I would say most common, especially in the playoffs, they lost close games. Correct. Just heartbreaking, 11th inning, walk-off in the rain, whatever the hell. You can picture there's a million of them. But this version that we just saw, first of all 3 games basically played out the same.
Right.
Which is you give them like a 3-run lead right away, and then you never
the first time the Yankees lineup would give up 3 runs. And then, right.
But now,
usually with some fielding misplaced in the outfield.
Well, that's what I was going to say. Is like it's not. It was a weird version of it, and we've certainly seen some bad defense too. I mean, I'm not going to list off any names. Throw LaTroy Hawkins under the bus. That's always the first one that comes to mind when he threw wide at first. But there's a million bad defensive plays too. There's bad everything when you talk about 20 years of this. But I feel like just a 5-0 or 5-1 loss is not the most common.
I agree.
Yankees Twins, and watching it, I don't think I didn't think Paddock was good, obviously, and we talked about the fact that, and maybe we'll talk more about it, but it seemed like he either stuff-wise wasn't all the way there or they had a little something on him, although he denies that and said they kind of looked into it. We can get into that later. But Joe Ryan pitched fine. And I mean, everybody pitched fine if they would have had competent defense behind them. Now, they still wouldn't have won because they didn't score any runs.
Correct.
So it didn't matter. But it was a very weird series, and it felt like weirdly, I don't know, lifeless. Just like as if they were like, we got to get done with these 3 games and then we can go to Cleveland. And it's like, there just wasn't that much even interesting about it. Like there was just nothing. And coming off, look, we're used to when we were talking 3 days ago or whatever on the show, we were looking at the schedule and I'm like, well, Yankees are coming down. That's not going to be good. And it's just, we know that. But coming off, what were they, 18-4, a stretch of 18-4. They had won 6 consecutive series. I mean, maybe I'm just stupid. I'm naive. I should have known better. But I certainly didn't expect them to just lay 3 eggs consecutively and then just go to Cleveland. Like this was such a non-competitive, but not even in the sense that you were just getting slaughtered. It was just like going through the motions almost.
These were 2 teams that looked like they were in different levels completely.
I guess, but I wouldn't even say that the Twins got dominant. They just didn't hit at all. They certainly pitched well enough to win 1 or 2 of these games.
Okay.
If you remove the defensive component.
Yes, you're
for
right,
sure.
right.
But even
Absolutely.
with the defensive component. I mean, they've been scoring 6 or 7 runs a game pretty consistently for a month now.
I'm pretty sure when we had our preseason over-under, our question about the Yankees was, what is their pitching going to do?
Right.
And
Well,
it's just, I don't know if it was the Twins' offense is not what we thought it was going to be. I don't know if the Yankees' pitching is so much better than we thought it was going to be. I don't know if the Twins' offense just kind of went into a little 3-day coma.
All of the above, probably.
Right.
But, I mean, look, Rodon and Stroman and Clark Schmidt, they're good pitchers, but I mean, Rodon, especially when he's healthy, can be an all-star caliber pitcher.
Sure.
Stroman, we know, we've seen for 10 years or whatever. Clark Schmidt's having a good first 6 weeks or whatever. But, I mean, come on. This wasn't, Koufax, Drysdale, and whoever. Like, this wasn't, this wasn't a Spawn and Sane and Pray for Ray. I'm getting older in my reference. This wasn't Maddox, Glavine, and Smoltz. This wasn't Big Train, Walter Johnson, and whoever other old ass was on the Senators. You know what I mean? Like, these are good pitchers, but no amount of good pitching explains what we saw from this lineup. And, coming off, like I said, 18-4 stretch, you hadn't lost a series in a month, basically. And you still just lay 3 eggs to the Yankees. And the Yankees are good. Like you said, I mean, look, they probably have the 2 best hitters in the league, I would say.
That's fair.
And we certainly saw that from Aaron Judge, and Soto's probably every bit as good. And the rest of their lineup is fine, and it didn't even matter really, bullpen. But, like, they have good starting pitching. They're going to make the playoffs. This is a good Yankees team. But, man, if you'd have told me they lost 2 out of 3 or they got swept and they gave up 10 runs, I just didn't expect it to be like a walkthrough vibe. You know what I mean? Yeah. And the crowds were good. Yeah. And I don't know. They drew 30,000, 31,000 for the last one. It was like those people just saw nothing. Right. There was just nothing. There wasn't even.
I was one of the 31,000. Yeah, I know.
You're a schmuck, John. You got roped into it. That's right. Although you guys got.
I think about 10,000 of those for Yankees fans, just so we're clear.
Well, probably. That's always true. Sure. You have do you use you have the monthly pass?
The Twins pass, yeah.
So it's not,
love that.
It's not as bad. He already prepaid. I didn't feel like he got swindled.
No, that's right. Yeah, and I prepaid all of $4 per game. So
yeah, like you said, the defense was. I mean, the outfield defense especially was very bad. That's something we've talked about in years past, which is like it's not as if you can get by with bad infield defense either, and. We've seen what happens when you don't have a capable shortstop or you don't have whatever. But outfield defense, I feel like more than anything, it sort of compounds on itself because you make a mistake in the outfield, it usually leads to runs.
Correct.
You make a mistake on the infield, it might just be a ground ball and it's a single or something like that. And, that hurts too. You don't turn a double play, you don't do this. I'm not saying that. But in the outfield, you start missing balls, and it's 2 or 3 bases.
It runs to the wall, right?
Right. Yeah. And, Castro always obviously had a regrettable series overall. He seemed furious with himself. He threw the ball
I bet he was. He was not the only one who was furious with him. Sure.
And then, after, it was interesting, this Rocco talking afterward about him. And his point was like, those are the type of miscues and kind of space cadet behavior,
correct,
that would sometimes get a player pulled. And Rocco has occasionally done that. That's not really his style, but he's occasionally done that. But his point was, Willie Castro's the last guy to do that too. Willie Castro is harder on himself, works harder, and is smarter, and all this stuff. And I can't point to a ton of spots where Castro has done that. It just so happens that this happened twice in a series. The bigger issue to me, we'll see if he does that again in Cleveland or something. That's another issue. But I'm willing to at least take the stance that Baldelli took with it, which is like, we like Willie Castro. Willie Castro's a hard worker and a smart guy, and he screwed up. So I don't need to punish him or something. I'm willing to buy into that. The bigger issue to me is they know Willie Castro's not a good center fielder. They talked all offseason and last season how we'd prefer not to play him in center field every day. And attached to that, they know Alex Kirilloff's not a good left fielder. Right. They didn't want to play him in left field either. They wanted Matt Wallner to be in left field. Not that would be significantly better, but their idea of this lineup coming into the season was not, Alex Kirilloff starting 4 or 5 times a week in left field. He's just not a good left fielder. And we didn't see it during this series, but they've been playing Miranda at third base. They know Miranda's not a legit third baseman. They're doing these things because of injuries and also because they want to get some bats in the lineup because guys like Margot and Farmer and et cetera, are just not producing anything offensively. So you stretch your defense to get some guys into the lineup that are hitting. Now, that's worked with Castro, and it's sort of worked with Miranda. Hasn't really worked with Kirilloff. He's just been bad on both sides. But, you start to not give up, but you start to stretch yourself knowingly. I mean, you can't be surprised.
The flip side of all the flexibility that they have is you don't have specialists that you necessarily trust in every position.
They wanted Kirilloff as the primary DH.
Correct.
They don't want him chasing down balls in the left center field gap. I mean, that was a bad play he made. It seemed like he lost it, or he thought he was going to hit the wall.
He looked like he was lost in the sun or something.
Yeah, I almost thought he reacted like he thought he was going to hit the wall for us.
That might be it.
But either way. He's just not he's not good first base or left field. He's a guy, maybe you start out there a couple times a week. They've been playing him pretty regularly out there. Same thing with Castro.
He's not a butcher. He's just not.
No, he's just not. Same with Castro. I mean, Castro's not, other than those couple plays aside, these guys aren't bad, but you start to kind of sacrifice defense at more than a couple of spots, particularly when you're doing it in 2/3 of your outfield and they're right next to each other. And it's like, well, you give up a bunch of fly balls in an inning or two, and you're putting yourself at risk there, and that's the price you pay to get some bats in the lineup. But, I don't know, you notice the next day Castro was at third.
Right.
Margot was in center. Now, the good news is, I think probably good news, is that it sounds like Buxton's going to be back either tonight. We're recording this Friday morning, so he'll either be back Friday or Saturday. It sounds like he's going with the team to Cleveland, or went with the team.
And he played yesterday?
Yes, he played 2 rehab games. I believe he went 0 for 6 with 3 strikeouts. He played like 6 innings in center field on Wednesday, and then like 7 innings at DH yesterday, and that's it. But it sounds like I believe he's already in Cleveland or on his way to Cleveland.
So if they give him one more day off, or if he jumps right in.
We'll see. So that kind of solves this issue for however long Buxton can be healthy, which maybe a minute, maybe a week, maybe a month, who knows. But, you stick him in center field, then all of a sudden Willie Castro can play third base. Willie Castro's much better at third base than center field. That also leaves Miranda open to play some DH instead of playing third base. It fixes a little bit, although you're still probably going to have Kirilloff in left, although you could play Miranda at third and play Castro in left too.
Good.
My question is more like, who are they going to, you guys will probably know this by the time you hear this, but who are they going to send down for Buxton? My assumption had been that it would be Austin Martin.
Right.
Why is it not Kirilloff at this stage?
Well,
Kirilloff has been awful for like a month.
That's fair.
He's not helping you defensively, obviously. And I'm not saying Austin Martin's looked great defensively either. He's actually looked, to me, surprisingly not great, even in left field. But Kirilloff is like literally hitting like 135 since the second week of the season. He got off to a really nice start. We were all optimistic and everything.
We talk about having nice problems to have. This one's sort of a crummy problem to have. Is you've got multiple options because guys just aren't performing.
And that doesn't even count the Farmer, Margot, Vasquez. Those guys aren't getting options.
Right.
They can't. So I don't know. Yeah, my assumption is it'll be Martin, just because Martin was called up when you undo the move that was made when Buxton went on the IL in the first place.
It makes sense.
And Martin hasn't really been playing that much. So
that's kind of my.
But
Kirilloff has, unfortunately.
I don't know what are you? I mean, we've seen it before with Kirilloff. Usually it's because of an injury, which I do have some questions about his health, although Baldelli was asked about that yesterday and said, yeah, we've thought about that too. As far as we know, he's healthy. Like, he says he feels fine, which is almost, in a way, equally worrisome, I guess, because then it's like, okay, well, now he just stinks. What happened? I mean, Parker Hagman had a good tweet, Parker Hagman of Twins Daily, of the Chanhassen baseball team.
That's, yeah.
What is he now? What's his official? He's the pitching coach?
I don't know that he's doing high school
coaching. Oh, is he not anymore? He's running the social for Minnesota Baseball.
Yes.
Anyway, Parker Hagman. At Hagman Parker on Twitter. He had a thing about Kirilloff that basically he's never seen fastballs. Say him and Larnach, same thing. But he's seeing like all these low changeups, and you can watch, if you watch his swing, he just sort of fishes at him. It's almost like, I just want to say to him, like, okay, what if you hit that? What's happening with that ball? It's going back to the pitcher, basically.
Right.
And he swings him. He's just sort of tries to golf it. But the worrisome part is the few fastballs he's getting now, he's so out of sorts that he's not even really hitting those. So I'm still a believer in Kirilloff. And the problem is, like, okay, if you send down Kirilloff, you're probably going to end up playing Martin in left a little bit more against righties and lefties, or you play Castro in left. And
I assume if they were sending down Kirilloff, that Martin would already be starting in places. You know what I mean? The fact that Kirilloff is consistently in the lineup suggests that he somehow still ranks higher than Austin Martin in terms of where you...
Like, the Kirilloff thing, I mean, he just hasn't been good for a while now.
Right.
And I think he's, like, sort of actively hurting you more than any other player. I mean,
well, that's because you're actively playing him.
Well, that's what I mean, though. And so part of it is, like, are you doing him any favors by just trotting him out there over and over to watch him flail away at pitches? Because he really just doesn't even look like himself. We've seen before it's usually because of injuries, but they send him to AAA. He resets. He dominates the International League for a month, and he comes back up. I don't know if that's the approach they want to take here. But, again, it's sort of like we talked about with, like, Santana earlier in the season, which is you can't afford – whether he's at DH, first base, or now usually in left field, that's not a spot, particularly when he's playing bad defense. You can't afford a guy who's not hitting out there. I mean, you're just giving up that's so much value that you're giving up. On the other hand, Wallner's not really been very good at AAA.
I presume Kirilloff is safe until Wallner actually becomes.
Yeah, I wonder about that. But, yeah, like you said, not a great problem that you can name 5 different guys who just on a performance side
probably
would be worthy of.
You don't really trust right now to have on the team, let alone in the lineup.
They need to clone Buxton. But yeah, this whole season has been such a test of like what we try to accomplish on this show, which is don't get too high, don't get too low. But like you start 7-13, and we're having to remind ourselves there's a lot of season left. Then you go 18-4, and it's like, oh, here we go. Like they can just do a dual parade with the Wolves, and now it's like, oh, you just lay it. You to use my reference from the Patreon, you S the bed against the Yankees 3 times.
When we going into this series, we said, okay, when you beat up on the White Sox and the Angels, those aren't measuring stick games, right? I mean, measuring stick games are games versus the Yankees, games versus the Orioles.
Yeah, or
or the Dodgers.
Even Red Sox, Mariners.
Listen, those are regular
Blue Jays.
But in terms of like, are we among the best in this?
But I almost think I agree. Except I think the Yankees, they've gotten to a point where it doesn't measure anything.
Well, maybe.
Like it's almost like its own entity. You know what I mean? Yeah. It's like it's not even of this world. Like it's not even like I'm being serious.
I know you are.
I'm going to read the stats now, John. Close your ears, buddy. But I calculated them, so I'm going to read them. You know how that works.
Mm-hmm.
Since 2002, so we're talking about 22 years.
Yes, 23 years.
23. Right? This is the 23rd season.
That's right.
Yeah, the Twins are now 44. Now think in your head what the next number is going to be. They have 44 wins. Think in your head what would go with 44.
66.
Right. 120.
Yeah, right.
44 and 120. So that's 164 games. That's essentially 2 games over a full season.
Yeah, right.
They played like a 44-win team, 120-loss team. That's a 268 winning percentage, which means 26.8%. That's insane. And you might say, well, the Yankees been good that whole time, which is largely true. And you might say, well, the Twins have stunk that whole time. Well, that ain't true at all.
Right.
They got like 10 division titles during that time. In fact, I looked this up, against all other teams, the other 28 teams, the non-Yankees,
sure,
they have a 514 winning percentage over those 23 years.
Nice.
Now, I'm not saying that's world-beating, but they've had a winning record against everyone but the Yankees collectively.
What, 84, 85 wins?
Yeah,
something like that?
That sounds about right to me. And here's maybe the saddest part, which is... because we've seen the progression of this, right? Like we've seen the team turn over about, I would say 4 to 5 times in terms of like the core of the team over 20-something years. I mean, you go back, it was like, initially it was the Koski, Minkiewicz, Torrey Hunter, Johan, those guys. Then it turned over to like the Mauer, Morneau, Nathan Kadire. Then it turned over to like the
Bomba Squad.
Yeah, well, before that you had Sano, Barrios, Kepler, Rosario, Polanco when they came up. Then you had the Bomba Squad, and now you have this group, I would say. So it's turned over like 4 or 5 times. You literally have a completely different front office.
5 or 6 generations, right? Yeah.
I guess it's the third technically change in the front office. Although the first change wasn't really much of a change. And you're on your third manager. Mm-hmm. And the saddest part is here's the winning percentages of the 3 managers they've had in 22 years. Ron Gardenhire, 269. You go, well, that's terrible. Surely the next guy must have been a lot better. Paul Molitor, 259. Worse.
Right.
And never beat him in the playoffs, obviously. Rocco Baldelli, to his credit, he looks like, the greatest of all. He looks like John McGraw out here. Tried to think of an old-timey manager. 273 winning percentage. You know how hard it is to go 20-something years with 4 or 5 different cores of a roster, multiple front offices, and 3 different managers, and not a one group could even win 30% of their games.
Right.
Do you know how, like I said, it's not of this.
They make it look easy.
Well, yeah. That's true. The Twins, you mean, or the Yankees?
Yeah, exactly.
The Twins,
the Twins do, yeah.
Well, I mean, yeah, I could. That's like, yeah, I could get knocked out by Mike Tyson super easy. I just stand there with my chin out. I don't even know. I mean, this is probably among the most talked about topics in the 13 years we've been doing this show. Certainly, is what the hell they lose to the Yankees all the time, and we're so far past the point of trying to explain it with everything. But the funny thing is, not funny, but they went 4-3 against the Yankees last year.
Yep.
And not that ends all past. It doesn't, wipe away everything. But they won a series here against the Yankees, and I remember writing about it. It was like in May or June, and the headline was basically, this shows at least what's possible, that this could be something new. And I remember being mocked endlessly for that. But I believe I was sort of right in that they did win the division and they did advance in the playoffs for the first time in 20 years. Right. But now you're right back to laying eggs against the Yankees. And they play them in about a month again.
They play them the week that I'm going to, the first week of June.
Yeah.
I will be at the game on June 4th.
You say that like it's a national holiday. Like they play them when I'll be in.
the week we just talked through. That
you and I. What about
that's right. That's right.
There's at least 12 people listening to this show, John.
The good news is we're not doing a free show that week.
Yeah, that's great news. Except maybe they'll beat the Yankees and we won't get to talk about it. Let's see. I had a couple other notes before we get to other things. But yeah, so now you'd like to not be licking your wounds to this level, going right into a very big series in Cleveland.
Right.
Unfortunately now, well, I guess they could technically sweep Cleveland and take first place, but it's not even really for first place. I mean, most likely you're going to win.
Twins are 2.5 games
right.
back.
I mean, you could sweep and take first place, but the Twins right now are in third place. Mm-hmm. So yeah, it's, again, you try to stay even keeled. You try not to get too low. You try not to get too high. It's been very difficult with this team. It's a real roller coaster craziness, but it's just one bad series against a good team. But I hope that what we saw is just, the Yankees curse again this week, as opposed to, oh no, hold it, this team's suddenly reverting back to it can't hit. That's my worry.
Because we're about to go into Cleveland.
Right, where the pitching's always going to be good.
And we just talked about, if, the Twins were to sweep, they would maybe end up in first place. Not necessarily, but they could.
If they were to get swept, they're going to be 5.5 out.
Yeah.
And they'll probably be might be in fourth place, depending on what the Tigers do at that point. Yeah, I mean,
this is an important series.
It's a big series, especially for May.
Right.
On the other hand, the Yankees series was, like you said, a test at least of something in a fairly big series.
Right.
Who do you want to message, John? Your phone is asking questions now. Boy, you are becoming Patrick Royce, buddy.
Patrick Royce.
Yeah, he'd be on Zooms during the COVID years, and just his computer would be asking him stuff. His phone would be asking him stuff. He'll just get calls in the middle of show. Like, we'll be in the post game with Rocco, and his phone will just ring, and he'll answer it. Hello. Who is that? Yeah. You're quickly. I always thought I was going to end up being the Patrick Royce, but maybe we'll both be the Patrick Royce. It's an inevitable path for people like us.
I think you're going to be the one who's going to end up being the
Can I tell you
Patrick
something? I was walking. Patrick's been going to a lot of games lately, and he's always very nice to me, chatting it up. But
we've had him on the Patreon.
Yeah, great guest. Well, I'm sure we'll have him on again. He seemed to have okay time.
And at the Meltdown.
That's right. He's 2-time guest. Yeah. We left the club out. I forget what game. It was last homestand. Before this homestand, last one. And he's shuffling out of the press box, or out of the clubhouse post game after we talked to whoever. And he's moving, like an 80-year-old guy moves. And I realized I'm not even gaining on him. Like, I walked out of the clubhouse like maybe 20 feet behind him, and I'm like, I think he's gaining. Like he's separating
gonna
from
lap
me.
you.
Like he's gonna get to the press box and come back.
Yeah.
And finally, I like hustle up. I got next to him. I said,
How's the hip?
I said, Patrick, we're one and the same now, brother. And I told him about my hip, and he said, oh yeah, well I've been putting off knee replacement or something like that.
Well,
I thought,
that's probably...
Jesus, and I thought, yeah, here we are, just a couple of 80-year-old guys, one of whom's 40.
40-something, yeah.
So yeah, but yeah, the lineup to me. They hit 195 for 20 games, and we had all these worries that I think were justified. And then they just sort of, snapped their fingers, and they were literally the best offense in the American League, if not baseball, for 20 or 24 games or whatever, 22 games, whatever it was.
And then they face the Yankees.
Then you face the Yankees, and this is one of the worst offensive performances. I mean, you can't get much worse than hitting a solo homer. And
better snap out of it here versus Cleveland.
It's just so strange to me, like.
Tough team, by the way, to get out of.
And the pitching matchups are Cleveland's got their better guys lined up, I would say. Bybee and like that. Carrasco, who's their worst guy, pitched yesterday. I saw it. But, I mean, this lineup is still, they're above average overall. But it's like, why? And we've seen this year after year. I mean, we saw it in the first half versus the second half last year, all this. Why is this lineup so
Jekyll and
boom or
Hyde.
bust?
Right.
Yeah, or Jekyll and Hyde. Like, why is it so? When things are rolling, it rolls, and when things slow down, they are just completely ineffective for games or weeks at a time. I don't really know how to explain that because the old cliche. Let me just say this though: the old cliche answers to that were, well, they're just swinging for the fences, and so they're striking out so much they're trying to hit home. They're not even doing that anymore. They have a below average strikeout rate. They didn't even strike out that much against the Yankees.
Yeah, right.
That's not even the excuse anymore. Now it's just they can't hit. So I don't know.
The explanation for why they've been so boom or bust has been the sausage, right?
Yeah. It's still there though. The stupid sausage.
Yeah, sausage.
Now I would say
it's fairly done.
Look, I've been trying to get rid of this sausage now for. It's not a euphemism. That's a good pickup line. Hey, I got a sausage I'm trying to get rid of. Anyway, I don't know why I'm getting dirtier as this show goes on. But I would say if you score one run, if you get shut out for 26 consecutive innings or whatever it was, 27, I guess. Well, sort of 27 consecutive innings. You can't have a run-scoring gimmick anymore. That's it. You lose your gimmick. That's
that. They've got to find
reset.
a new gimmick.
You got to find a new gimmick. Get out of wait. But yeah.
Speaking of home run sausage, Soda Stick, our first sponsor,
this maybe
has a home run sausage
not a great
shirt,
segue, but
which I love. It's if you remember back in the listen, we've been with Soda Stick for a long time. They used to have a Smell 'em T-shirt, right? That was sort of a. I think, and the home run sausage. First of all, you just want to go to a baseball game with home run sausage emblazoned across your chest, I think, in the T-shirt, right? But the design of it is similar to the Smell 'em thing, which kind of calls back to
the old era we were talking about earlier.
Exactly right.
Metrodome era.
And what I like about Soda Stick, this shirt, which has become very popular, and I don't think it's going to be available much longer for you to get, but what I like about it is that's the sort of thing that if you just were wearing a home run sausage shirt at, the Marlins Stadium,
right? They'd have you committed.
They'd be like, "What? What?
Have you ever seen those big butterfly nets they use? They'd get you with that, and then you get 5150.
The vaudeville hook.
Yeah. But if you wear it to Target Field,
you get it.
You might get what's that shirt?
Right, that's right.
And then they hit you with the butterfly net. But when they put you in the paddy wagon from the butterfly net, there's going to be a lot of Twins fans in there wearing the same shirt with you. So you guys can bond.
But that is the beauty of Soda Stick, is that they've got their stuff is clever, and it's the sort of thing that other Minnesota fans get.
It's unique designs because it's made by local people who are actually fans of the team. It's not just the team logo slapped on a T-shirt. And if you go to Soda Stick, soda like Minnesota, sodastickco.com, or just Google Soda Stick, obviously, and you use the promo code Gleeman, you can get 15% off.
That's right.
And it's not just Twin stuff. It's Wolf stuff.
Sure. Oh, my goodness.
Vikings, college, all Minnesota
sports. What was the latest
sports.
Wolves one I thought? Length. They've got one about length.
Length?
Length. Lenth. Because the one when the Wolves were beating up on the Nuggets in Game 2.
Yeah,
I'll talk about how the Wolves just have length. I can't remember. I think it was something that Barkley kept saying.
That's like when people say. Have you ever noticed people say height?
yeah, right.
I think it's a Southern thing. I always want, it makes my brain explode. Anyway, there's a new T-shirt for idea height.
We're going to save you some other money, more money too, for when you try to go to the Wolves game or to the Twins game, and that is Game Time. If you get, don't try to find the Game Time website. It doesn't exist.
It's an app.
It's an app.
Much easier.
Right. So download the Game Time app, and what it does is it specializes in hard to find or sort of last minute tickets that are available.
It also can help you find like the best value in the ballpark.
Right. Yes.
Where it's like, here's your price range. What's the best available section? What's the best view? So you're not just sort of purchasing blindly.
You actually get to see sort of the view from
Yeah.
that seat and what you're going to see.
It's,
from that, right?
John will get up off whatever bar stool he's at about 11:40,
That's about right.
and then from the 15-minute
Yesterday that
walk
was Glicks.
to
Yeah,
the ballpark.
that's right.
I'm not lying, folks. This is real. As a 15-minute walk to the ballpark, you punch up the app.
Yeah.
By the time you get to gate 34 or whatever gate you're going in, you just flash the ticket and you walk right in. It couldn't be easier. And you can take the guesswork out of buying MLB tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use the code Gleeman for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account, redeem the code GLEEMAN. You get $20 off. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. Okay, let's, as they say in baseball parlance, let's flush that Yankees series.
Let's turn the page.
I've loved being around the team the past 5 years, I guess, 4 years. The phrasing that's used for a lot of, or the lingo that's used for a lot of things. Bad games get flushed.
Right.
Rained out games get banged.
Yeah.
Ornery players have the red ass. We've talked about that a lot. There's so much. I should make a list. It's such a great list. And the funny thing is, you find yourself using them. Like I find myself
Of course.
using it. Like I come back from the ballpark and Becky's like, "Oh, they didn't end up playing." I'm like, "Yeah, it got banged." And she's like, "You did what?" And I'm like, "The game got banged, honey. We all went and banged. It got banged. It was over. Everybody in the press box, they banged it." And she's like, I don't want. What you and Dan and Doe do in your own time is she couldn't care less, believe me. Okay, so let's talk a little bit. We talked about Buxton likely coming back.
Right.
You know, we'll see. He had been.
What that means exactly is it can be. But I mean, I presume it means he's playing center field, though.
Oh, well, yes. I mean, that's at this point, that's what they can count on. I mean, that's what looked best from him
Right.
the first month, basically, because he played roughly the first month. I mean, he looked, I'm not going to say he looked prime Buxton, but he looked very good in center field, and he played a lot of center field. And
Better than Willie Castro?
certainly better than Will Castro, better than Manny Margot, better than Austin Martin. I mean, even at 90% or whatever, Byron Buxton is still one of the best center fielders anybody's ever seen. And, you know, the domino effect, like we talked about, is you don't need Castro in center. You can move him other places that he's better suited. So that'll help. He had been, this seems like forever ago, but he had been showing some signs of life offensively, Buxton, the last, 10 or 12 games before he went on the IL. Yeah. But I just have, I don't have any, expectation, or I don't know what to expect offensively for him.
I mean, to see where they bat him.
Yeah, I certainly would make an argument that he should be batting as low as possible initially. But I don't know, right-handed. I mean, their lineups to me have been a little weird too because like Correa's been hitting fifth a lot, which I don't really understand. But these are, picking nits basically. So Buxton will be back. We got to find out. We're assuming it'll be Martin. I would make the case that it should be Kirilloff. I have no inside knowledge of that or anything. Let's just assume I never have any. I don't know why I preface everything. Like anybody thinks Gleeman's got inside knowledge. I have no inside knowledge. I barely know stuff about myself. The other injury, just to run through him real quick. We talked about him on the Patreon. People, you should know. You guys probably know this. But if you enjoyed this show, first of all, God bless you. Second of all, if you say, I don't like waiting a week or sometimes 2 weeks between episodes, we do at least one and typically 2 episodes per week in addition to this one, and those are exclusively available.
It costs you at most $2 and maybe $1. Right.
They're only available to Patreon supporters / subscribers, which you go to Patreon, patreon.com/Gleeman. There's about, about 4,000 something
4,100 something
people signed up for that. So you it's our little
You're not
club
alone.
for commercial
About
free.
1/3 of all you people out there are also Patreon supporters right now.
We like to make that half. Then we could retire.
That's right.
Let's make that half instead of 1/3. Seems like such a subtle shift. How do we go from 1/3 to half? But it's like the difference between 1/3 and half in baseball is a lot. You know what I mean? Like
the difference between a 54-win team and an 81-win team.
Right. We're a 54-win team right now. We're trying to get to 500
right.
and then quit the sport. That's what we're trying to do. The other injuries, Royce Lewis is ramping up. Nick Paparesta, their trainer, told the reporters a couple days ago that this is like a big, week stretch for Royce Lewis.
He's ramping up.
That they're going to try to test him more. He's going to not just run straight lines. He's going to do, change directions. He's going to bat. He's going to throw. They're trying to ramp him up so that he could be cleared for a rehab assignment, basically.
Sure.
He's been out now, 6-7 weeks, I want to say?
Yeah, that's right.
March 28th, I know that.
Pretty much, yep.
So what are we? Now it's May 15th or something like that. So we're looking at 7 weeks roughly. Yeah. The initial expectation, I would say, was 2 months.
7 weeks from yesterday.
So we're pretty close on as far as I'll give them credit. This is as close as they tend to get. Now we'll see if there's setbacks. Like you said, this is a big week for him. I mean, it only takes one little slip up, literally or figuratively, and you're like, okay, now he's not going to be back. But I mean, that would be.
But I think the point is they've been about as cautious as they can be on this to get to the point where once he actually is going to start pushing himself, they can feel confident that it's going to happen. So.
Yes, which I think is just in general the smart approach to take, but especially with Royce Lewis.
But it's hard. It's hard to wait.
Royce is. I wouldn't want to be the guy who has to tell Royce Lewis. He just seems. Well, yeah, we'll talk about that. Topa shut down for 6 weeks. Justin Topa. He's trying to avoid surgery on a partially torn patella tendon in his knee. Yeah, which my understanding is that it's a situation where surgery would end his season, but delaying surgery would not affect next season, and so he's basically saying, "Well, if I have the surgery now, I'm out for the season.
Right.
Either way, I'm going to be ready to go for next season. So why don't I wait as long as possible?
Sure. Shut
down for 6 weeks, then you start to ramp up, somewhere in July, around the All-Star break probably." And if miraculously the platelet-rich plasma and the time off and the rehab has helped, then the Twins have a reliever in August and September. Right. And if it doesn't, then you undergo the surgery pretty quickly at that point, and you should be ready 6 months later
spring training, right?
For spring training anyway. So that's I don't know.
That's not an insignificant loss.
Yeah, although it's hard to characterize it as a loss because they never really had him. But yes, they were expecting him to be I would say the fourth or fifth reliever in this bullpen.
And, heading into the Yankees series, if you listen to Monday's Patreon show, there was a lot of discussion about how the bullpen has been stretched thinner and thinner and thinner during that win streak. And one of the things that's been stretched thin is the high leverage arms. They wanting to get, over relying on Griffin Jacks, wishing that you had Brock Stewart back, pushing Duran awfully hard for as soon as he got back.
Well, I have great news, John. None of these guys did a damn thing during the
I noticed.
So
they all got Monday off, and then they all got Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday off.
So Duran and Jack should be raring to go. Brock Stewart, the update on him was he also got a PRP injection and is not as close as he had hoped, I'll say. Right. But no setback or anything. But he's got to ramp up, and he's another guy, unfortunately. I mean, these things are kind of self-fulfilling in a way. Is you have all these injured guys, and they've been injured for multiple years, and they have these lengthy injury track records, and it's like, well, we're going to treat them more cautiously.
Correct.
I mean,
which is probably the right thing to do. But
I agree. Brock Stewart missed 3 months last year with an elbow. This time it's a shoulder, but it's the same, general idea with him.
Sometimes the reason you end up with a player like that you're able to acquire a player like that, is because they have an injury history, right?
Yeah, but I mean, they miss Brock Stewart. I think there's a tendency to over hype this stuff where it's like, this guy's the most essential guy on the team. Like, no, I don't. But you take one piece out of a three-headed bullpen monster that had been really good. And although we've really never seen the three-headed version for more than a day or two, because by the time Duran debuted this season, Stewart was already being used less, and then pretty quickly after that was placed on the IL.
Plus, it was really supposed to be like a five-headed monster, right? Theobar has not been quite who we thought Theobar was going to be, but last year he was one of the
Nobody thought Theobar and Topa were going to be the same as Stewart Jackson and Duran, is all I'm saying. But yeah,
there were eighth-inning guys last year, seventh-inning guys last year. Topa was.
Yeah, for a different team.
Yeah, right.
Yeah. They need Stewart. they just from a usage standpoint. First of all, he's really good. He's been, about as good as a pitcher can be.
Right.
Over 40-something innings over 2 years now for the Twins. He's like literally had a 0 ERA for the Twins, 0 point something.
Well, just before he went on the IL, he gave up his second home run ever with the Twins, or first home run with the Twins, or something.
But just from a, like we've seen from a usage standpoint, it makes a big difference in games to have three guys instead of two guys that you trust, because then you can go 7, 8, 9 instead of how do we get to the eighth?
Right, exactly.
Or stretching Duran or Jax to pitch the seventh and then asking him to pitch a second inning or whatever.
Or using one in the seventh, one in the eighth to get through the tough part of the lineup, and then now we get bring Okert the ninth.
Exactly.
Right.
And then you see the domino effect of that in the days following, which is you do that 2 games in a row,
right?
Then all of a sudden you don't have either of them for the third game, and then you're using Jay Jackson in the seventh inning, and then what do you know? Where you have 3, that doesn't protect you. You still run into the same issues, but it makes a.
Both of the losses last week were due to basically, or at least due in part to not having enough arms in the bullpen anymore.
So those are the injury updates. Let's see. Winder's rehabbing with the Saints. But I don't think he's eligible till like June 1st or the end of May. Not that he's going to save you or anything like that. And then the other one, Matt Cantorino has started throwing again from 90 feet maybe.
Oh, good.
Which is good. I have no visions of him making some big impact for the Twins this year, unfortunately. Yeah. But just like for his own sake.
I agree.
I will tell you, like, there's no better combination of raw stuff and personality on the Twins than Matt Cantorino. Right. When he's healthy, he throws high 90s with multiple good off-speed pitches and has had just dominance in the minors, even the high minors, and also one of the not only nicer people you'll ever meet, but like interesting and super smart.
Yeah, right.
Like, genius level smart.
Right.
And also just a very nice nerd. And I would just like him, like, for his own life,
right,
to get a clean run at this thing. To even if it's a couple years, to establish himself as something. Get to the majors. Throw a pitch in the majors. So I'd like to. Hopefully, that's a thing in the second half. But he's got a lot of hurdles to clear before then.
Any word on Brooks Lee?
No, I've complained about this too. Well, I've complained about it to the Twins' face, so I'll complain about it here. But I don't understand their, approach to minor league injuries. Because
you're not talking about you're talking about their approach for communication.
Yes,
about
not handling them. That's a whole other issue, obviously. But we can ask Baldelli, we can ask Paparesta, we can ask their communications department. Hey, do you have an update on Justin Topa? Or I can just go up to Justin Topa and ask him.
Sure.
We do that too, obviously. Well, I can't do that with Brooks Lee. I can't do that with Walker Jenkins. And unfortunately, the minor league communications department are, they're loose lips sink ship. They're not talking. Right. And then Paparesta's stance on it is, well, I don't talk about guys who aren't on the 40-man roster. That's not under my purview, which is true. But my thing is, like, whose purview is it? Who can I talk to? And I just think, they don't owe me anything. It's not like it matters to me. It doesn't, other than I'm trying to get information to fans that care. My point on this, particularly with Jenkins and Lee, and I've said this to, let's call it a high-ranking Twins official, you can't hype these guys and want people to get excited about these guys and want people to pay attention to prospect rankings and videos you post online and all this stuff and get excited about the future of these teams, which every team does. I'm not saying they don't do that.
Right.
And then when your number one prospect, a guy you just gave $8 million to last summer and is a top 20 global prospect, plays 2 innings in a game and then misses 6 weeks and not provide an update, even when people ask for it.
Right.
I think you're doing a disservice to your fans, and more than that, you're creating these murky situations for the players themselves, and we've seen that going back to the less information you provide about an injured player, the more you just let speculation run rampant. Right. And then it's like, well, he had his leg amputated. That's why he's not playing. It's a very quick. The telephone game changes there. So I've been frustrated by that aspect of the Twins because I think they've made great strides at the major league level. In terms of communicating injuries and timelines and making players available and making Nick Paparesta available relative to the previous training regime.
Sure.
And I give them, and I mean, we've talked about that, hopefully plenty. I give Nick Paparesta a ton of credit for, he's not a guy who's trained in talking to the media and all that.
Yeah, he's
once
not a PR person. Right,
he stands and he says, tell me a name and I'll tell you the update.
Right.
But then you get to Walker Jenkins and Brooks Lee, and it's like, I don't know.
Right.
It's like somebody's got to know. So it's been frustrating to me. But returns are not imminent, right. I would say.
We've not heard that they're on assignments.
In some sense, it only really matters for Brooks Lee relative to this season's Twins. I mean, Walker Jenkins is years away.
Of course.
At best case scenario, he's 3 years away probably. But Brooks Lee, if healthy, might be leading the team in at-bats right now.
Right.
So that's a point.
They have holes they could fill with Brooks Lee.
Yes. Right. I mean, if he wouldn't have been called up, I think he probably would have been called up on March 29th to then replace Royce Lewis at third base.
I agree.
If for whatever reason they were, if healthy, I'm talking about, right. If for whatever reason the Twins were like, we're not ready to call up Brooks Lee yet, I think 3 weeks later when Correa goes down, he almost certainly would have been called up to then sub for Correa at shortstop or third base with Castro playing. They had the whole left side of the infield out by mid-April for multiple weeks, and that Lewis has been out the whole time now, obviously. And you got a top 50 consensus shortstop prospect there. I mean, so yeah, it's a missed opportunity, but I hesitate to even stick on that point of it sucks for the Twins. It's he has a herniated disc in his back at 23. I joked about how I feel like I'm Royce and I'm half his age. Well, he's half my age. I don't like the idea of a guy at 23 having a herniated disc in his back. So yeah, they gotta get healthy. Lineup. Let's talk about this up and down lineup. I think I don't know. We talked about Kirilloff, I guess, but Wallner has not. He's hit some homers at AAA. Yeah. But I think I looked yesterday, the day before, he's got 40 strikeouts and 6 walks or something like that. And he's hitting, low 200s. That's that I think goes along with the idea. Because, I mean, he's crushed AAA, AA, single A.
Sure.
Their premise when they sent him down, what I would say pretty quickly, what was mid-April or whatever it was, after, I don't know, he'd had 30 at-bats or something like that. Yeah. Was that his struggles were beyond just, a guy's off to a slow start. They were indicative of a guy who was lost, of a guy who, continuing to trot him out there every day, wasn't going to do the Twins any favors, wasn't going to do him any favors. He needed, as Rocco Baldelli said a couple times, a full reset at AAA. And the fact that he's running into some fastballs and hitting some homers, so I'm not saying he's just been horrible or anything, but the fact that he's not even putting up kind of his usual AAA or AA numbers.
I mean, his numbers are nowhere near what they were last year.
Right.
AAA.
That to me,
including things like you mentioned, the ratio of walks to strikeouts, which was basically 2-1 last year, and now it's 6-1.
Right. That to me says they were probably right. That his struggles weren't just a guy had a bad 2 weeks or whatever. Right. He's a high variance hitter to begin with. And so maybe that plays a part in it. He's always going to be a high strikeout, boom or bust, all that. And those guys are streakier, good and bad. But, that plays into the Kirilloff thing. I mean, if Matt Wallner was down there right now and had a, 1,100 OPS or something like that, it'd be a whole hell of a lot easier to just swap him and Kirilloff, sort of like you swapped Larnach and Wallner to begin with. Right. But I don't think they're going to do that with Wallner, in part because he hasn't earned it, but in part because I think they feel with him, if we still think this guy could be a part of our future, which they should, it's not helping him any to send him down for a few weeks, have him do not great, and then just bring him right back up and throw him into the fire. So, you're short on options. You know, part of that is Wallner, part of it is Brooks Lee, who would be an option at this point to at least take a lineup spot. Yep. You know, you already have Miranda up, and it's not like he's been spectacular. He's been okay at times. Even Larnack's coming back down to earth a little bit, which, you know, is to be expected. They just don't have, you look at like the AAA roster, and it's like, honestly, the guy I might be stumping for, if you're trying to replace Kirilloff, is Deshaun Kersey. Yeah. Who is a legit center fielder who can certainly be an excellent left fielder. He's a left-handed bat. He's fast, and over the last year and a half or so, he's actually shown a pretty good bat since he got to Double-A.
How old is he now?
25 or 26.
Okay.
I mean, he was drafted out of Utah, so this was like 5 years ago, so he was already on the older side, right. And he was seen as, you know, maybe a, you know, good glove, no-hit fifth outfielder type for the first several years of his career. And then last year, he hit, I don't know, 285, right. 10, 15 homers, a whole bunch of doubles. He started drawing some walks. He's always been a guy that can steal 30, 40 bases. I mean, he's a legit center fielder, got high-end speed. He'd probably be the second fastest guy in the Twins,
sure,
other than a healthy Buxton. For whatever reason, I'm not like saying he's going to be a star. I think he's probably a fourth outfielder, but the Twins clearly, now maybe their stance has changed because he's duplicated last year's success now at AAA.
But they did not put him on the 40-man roster last year. And they allowed him to be chosen in the Rule 5 draft.
And to their credit, I guess, he wasn't picked in the Rule 5 draft. Yeah. The night before the Rule 5 draft, I can say this is not exactly scandalous, but we had a media session with Falvey like 12 hours before the Rule 5 draft. And I said, I was asking him Rule 5 questions because I was the only one who cares about that sort of thing. Right. And I said, I was surprised you left Kersey unprotected. He goes, I know you love Kersey or something like that. I was like, okay. But I was genuinely surprised by that. And now he's hitting, 290 with pretty good power and some walks and some speed. He plays all three outfield spots. He's a left-handed hitter. To me, he's not a guy that you pencil in for the next 5 years. But if the goal is, how can we improve the defense? How can we add a competent left-handed bat to replace Kirilloff if he's the one who gets sent down in that scenario? And how can we add a little bit more speed and a little bit more athleticism, which I think this team could always use? I would like to give him a shot. They have 40-man roster spots to burn now at this point. They can put guys on the 60-day IL. So, yeah, I would like to see him get an opportunity, in part because I think he deserves it. Over the last year and a half, I think he certainly looks like a potential, role player major leaguer, but in part because there's not other guys at AAA who are exactly, banging down the door offensively. Right. Like, it's not first of all, the Saints are not good this year. They're well below 500, and the offense is just not. There aren't like five standout guys there like there were at times.
I mean, the guys who were going to be banging
Larnack
at the St. Paul
are
exactly.
Up, and Martin are up already.
That's right. So. And or hurt Brooks Lee, when they were 7-13, one of the concerns that we had was we took a look at that lineup and said, maybe we were wrong, right? Maybe these guys are not going to be performing as much as we. And things changed because they went 18-4. Because a bunch of the guys that we had some questions about were performing at a really high level. I mean, guys like Larnack and Miranda and Santana came alive and Castro came alive and he had been right. But I still don't really know who what this offense is. Like I could still see this offense going, Larnack turning back into a pumpkin a little bit, or Miranda. 0 for his last 14 or something at this point, right? Or, Kirilloff not being able to shake it.
Without Lewis and without a healthy Buxton,
right?
That changes things.
But even if you've got Buxton in the lineup, I'm not totally sure I know what Buxton's providing.
But I'm saying without a healthy Buxton. Yeah, I mean, I think it's simplistic, but they thought Lewis was just going to be the number 3 hitter all year.
Right.
Well, now he's played 2 innings. It's like you're going to be mixing and matching. And I get that. And I think it's maybe unfair to say, look at the lineup without Lewis and mostly without Buxton and all that and say, well, what is this? This is a real hodgepodge group. First of all, they've been above average overall, so maybe that's a credit to them and the coaching staff and the lineups that they put out there. I know people are going to scoff at that, but But they just haven't. I mean, even like Julian, whose overall numbers are solid, it's been nothing amazing, nothing amazing, nothing.
Right.
Like it's just very. I would say the only guy I'm really trying to think. Like the only guy in that lineup, Correa maybe, but he was going to say Correa. He was hurt. Is Jeffers,
right?
Who's been consistently. Jeffers
but
went like.
I mean, but I don't have a lot of confidence that Jeffers is going to maintain this level of performance for
he'll
next
win,
6 months.
He'll win MVP if he does.
He will, right?
But Jeffers has roughly maintained this level for a year and a quarter now.
Yeah.
He started, I don't know what he was 1 for 20 or something like that. Starting out, we were joking he
You're
couldn't
right.
even get the ball past the pitcher.
Right. Yeah, that's
and
right.
since then, he's got 1,000 OPS. He's top 5 in the American League in most categories. He's really the only one I would say. I'm trying to think who else. I mean, certainly Kepler's been great, but Kepler started 1 for 20 and was on the IL. Carlos Correa has been solid throughout, but he was on the IL for 3 weeks.
Right.
Julian's been very up and down. They've just got very little. And this is sort of natural. It's not. There aren't a whole lot of lineups where it's like everybody's been great consistently all year. You score 1,000 runs if that happens. But yeah, I mean they.
I mean, you make a good point in that we thought the 2, 3, 4, 5 batters were going to be Lewis and Buxton and Correa and Kepler. All 4 have been on the IL already.
Right.
Right.
Yeah, and then you're just getting so like we talked about this when they were going real bad, but there's a big difference. It's one thing to say like, okay, Vasquez, Margot, Farmer, etc. are not hitting. But there's a difference between hitting 205 and hitting 145.
Sure, right.
And like when you're hitting 145, and I'll toss Kirilloff into that mix, unfortunately, over the last month or so. And honestly, I think he's hitting 130 in his last 30 games or something like that, roughly. When you have 4 or 5 guys who aren't even hitting, they'd have to improve to get bad. Like they're just in,
correct.
Like single A guy pushed to the majors territory.
Right.
Well, you can't build a lineup that has any consistency because there's going to be 2 or 3 of those guys in the lineup every day.
Right. Yeah.
No matter what the matchup is.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like when you're facing a righty, Kirilloff's going to be in there. When you're facing a lefty, Farmer and Margot are going to be there. Half the time, Vasquez is going to be behind the plate, et cetera, et cetera. And so I think that plays a part in it too. Is like you need no lineup is counting on. 850 OPS from the 6, 7, 8, 9 spots in the lineup.
You just don't want a 400 OPS.
Right. You're counting on once or twice a week somebody from that group steps up and goes 2 for 4 with a homer, and it's like they've just so rarely gotten that it's just those spots have just been black holes in the lineup, and I think it's easy to just like kind of group them as they're not hitting well. This is so far beyond not hitting well. You can take those 3 or 4 guys. Santana has broken free of that group, thankfully.
Yeah, thank God. Yeah.
But you take now Kirilloff's in the group. You take that 4 guys. I mean, they're hitting like pitchers. And it's think of when you used to watch National League games. The offense might be rolling along. You're rolling along. You get to the 8th spot. They intentionally walk them, and it's like, there's an automatic out. The inning's over. Right. Well, now you got 2 or 3 of those guys, and they're actual hitters. Right, yeah. So I think that plays a part in the lack of consistency.
Yesterday, we were at the game, and we were looking up at the scoreboard. To their credit, and now they're showing OPS on the lineup with the OPS next to each one, and 7, 8, and 9 were all OPSs in the 400s.
Right, which is just you can't.
Yeah. You got Margot and Vasquez and Kirilloff sitting there.
As when they were 7 and 13 in mid-April, our point was kind of, look, they're not going to ditch these guys, especially the veteran guys. Wallner got ditched because he has options and stuff. But, the Santanas and Farmers and Margot and Vasquez, and it's worked pretty well for Santana, showing patience. But they were always going to show. I mean, every team in that situation would show. No team is releasing a veteran 20 games in. Right. What I remember pointing to was June 1st as kind of if this thing's still going by June 1st, June 1st is now 2 weeks away.
Yeah.
And for the most part, I can't really make an argument that Margot, Farmer, or Vasquez look any better. Yeah. I think you could probably make an argument they collectively have actually looked worse. Vasquez, to me, looks completely cooked, unfortunately, because he's the one who's got a year left on his contract. And I do think who was the old? Was it Tom Kellyism or somebody? The first third of the season is.
I think that's Billy Beane.
Billy Beane.
Yeah,
for figuring out what you got. the second third of the season is for what? Making changes.
Right.
And the last third of the season is for actually pushing forward with what you got. Well, we're coming up on the first third of the season. We're at, what are we at, 45 games or something like that. And so
Camargo's got an 828 in OPS in St. Paul, too. So, I mean.
Yeah, Camargo. I would say if you're going to just play Jeffers at DH, call up Camargo and let him split time with Vasquez behind the plate.
Just see what you got there.
Yeah, I mean, he at least has some punch, and maybe you figure out that he's somebody you want longer term. I don't know. I wish they had some more options at AAA. Hopefully, Lewis comes back sometime around early June, and he can be an option. Hopefully, later than that, Brooks Lee, and et cetera. But yeah, it's the veteran depth that they assembled. Some of it we like, some of it we felt was kind of bargain bin that they wouldn't have been their first choice.
I mean, it was bargain bin because they were cutting payroll.
Right, exactly. It really hasn't worked out. And even, Santana we're treating differently because he got off to a horrendous start, but for the last month or so, he's actually been pretty good. But even he's got a, below average OPS as a first baseman overall. I mean, the overall impact still matters. So, I don't know. I think they're going to have, or they should have, some tough calls to make with 3 or 4 veterans and maybe even some relievers, but let's focus on the lineup. But veteran role players who are just not producing, and they're producing such little offense that it's like, can you continue with this? Because what's the upside? What's the upside with Manuel Margot? Like, Manuel Margot's hitting 160 here. He's playing 3 times a week. There's no fear with, we're going to release Manny Margot and we're going to live to regret that. What is the worst case scenario? He latches back on with like the Rays and puts up a 750 OPS in a platoon role. I mean, yeah, you'll be like, oh, I wish we could have gotten that. But this isn't going to be a David Ortiz situation with these guys.
The problem is that there's no point in necessarily releasing them because, as we spent the first half of the podcast talking about, we've got multiple guys we wouldn't mind sending down to AAA right now for a reset.
Right. You lack other options. Although certainly, whether it's giving Austin Martin a bigger role, and I don't think he's looked great either, someone like, I don't know, Michael Hellman from AAA. I mean, you have some AAA guys who, even though they're not lighting the world on fire there, at some point, I'd rather just go with some semblance of youth or upside or future or whatever. And so I do think as you get closer to June than you do to May, or to April, I should say, these are, they become more viable questions of like, from a decision standpoint, from a fish or cut bait standpoint, and I think they have a bunch of tough calls. Some other stuff, but first let's talk about our last couple of sponsors here.
The next sponsor is Factor, who produces these great meals. I was really excited to have them sign back on with us because I love their meals, and Chrissy was excited because she loves their meals, and my daughter was excited because she loves their meals.
It's a whole family affair.
This is my daughter just comes and steals them out of our fridge.
That works too.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, because they're individual meals, and you just microwave them, and
super easy.
Oh, and good. Like,
yes, they have. Also, you can choose.
It's hard to convince people that a microwavable meal it can be really good. But I'm gonna tell you, their butter chicken is something I want.
There's been advancements versus TV dinners from 30 years ago.
Right. Yes.
And the nice thing about Factor is, you can choose your kind of weekly menu. If you want something heavy in meat or vegetarian or
protein
kid friendly or whatever it is,
keto or keto.
You can choose all kinds of stuff, and they'll send it right to you. You just pop it in the microwave. So for someone like me who has no cooking ability, it works out very well.
Yeah, it's healthy, it's easy, it's fast. It's exactly what you want for the summer.
Yeah, and it has, you can get filet mignon. I had something with shrimp. I remember last time when they sent us some stuff. It's, higher caliber than you're probably thinking in a microwave meal.
Yes.
You can go to factormeals.com/Gleeman50, Gleeman50, and use the code Gleeman50. And the reason it's 50, Gleeman50, is you get 50% off your first box plus 20% off your next month after that.
Wow.
That's Gleeman50, one word, but Gleeman50, at factormeals.com/Gleeman50. Get 50% off your first box plus 20% off your next month while your subscription is active. That's factormeals.com/Gleeman50 and the code Gleeman50.
And also the other aspect of summer that people have to get used to is the longer summer days. It can almost become, we're getting to the point where the sun can almost become oppressive in June. It gets to be, is it 10 o'clock and it's still light out, right? And then it's 5 o'clock and the sun is coming up.
You think you're in Alaska.
That's about right.
But Hatch attempts to help you with that. Basically, the idea with Hatch is it's kind of a new age alarm clock, but it's a lot more than that.
Right.
It can help you get to sleep in terms of kind of setting the environment, in terms of sounds and light. It can help you stay asleep.
Right.
By doing the same thing, whether you're into white noise, whether you're into raindrops, whether you're into whatever. And then it can help you wake up in a way that is a lot less jarring than the annoying buzz of a alarm clock that you've dealt with your entire life. It can kind of gradually wake you up. Like you can choose a setting that will like gradually wake you up by getting slightly lighter and having like bird sounds slightly louder.
That's right.
Like you're in a forest or something.
In terms of helping you fall asleep, it can help you build habits around being able to fall asleep. So you're not just scrolling on your phone until you pass out,
Yeah, it's Hatch is offering
or not passing out.
our listeners up to 20% off and free shipping on any Hatch device purchase. Go to hatch.co/Gleeman. You get 20% off. That's hatch.co/Gleeman, not com. Co. Hatch.co/Gleeman. You get 20% off any Hatch device. You can sleep better. Okay. One thing I want to talk about with the defense, which hopefully Buxton is going to single-handedly address here in a big way. But, I mean, think about how, unfortunately, we've had to watch a lot of fill-in center fielders over the years.
Sure.
Because he's constantly injured. A lot of times it was like Jake Cave or Rob Refschneider.
I was coming up with two.
God, I can't even.
Williams Estudillo.
Well, Williams Estudillo. But then, Willie Castro, Austin Martin recently. There's been Nick Gordon.
Yeah.
They, for years, I felt, once it became apparent, 3-4 years into Buxton's career, let alone 4 or 5 years in, that he's just not a guy you can pencil in for 140 games.
Sure.
Our thought a lot of off seasons, or we were kind of surprised, I guess, by the lack of attention paid or the lack of resources devoted to a backup outfielder, a backup center fielder, a fourth outfielder, whatever. Right. Someone who, when Buxton, not if, but when Buxton goes down, can step in. And for whatever reason, they stuck with Jake Cave in that role for a long time. Then they switched to Nick Gordon. They switched to whoever. There's 10 different guys you could name. Sure. Last year was really the first time I felt, and I think you agreed just based on talking through it last offseason, that they kind of said, all right, we need an actual starting caliber, at least low-end starting caliber center fielder. They went out and traded for Michael Taylor, and then they needed him more than ever because Buxton never set foot in center field. Right. Michael A. Taylor started, 120 games in center field. He was excellent defensively and at times very good offensively, and overall certainly passable for a starting center fielder offensively. Popped, I think, 20 homers. Bad on-base percentage, but whatever. Then they let him go over money. I mean, let's just be honest. He wanted to come back. They wanted him back, and they just couldn't. They didn't have the money that he wanted.
That's right.
They move on to Manuel Margot, and it turns out they got like one look at Manuel Margot and said, no.
Well, yeah. I mean, they did start him in center field sometime, I think, since the last podcast.
Yeah, twice, I think.
Okay,
but,
yeah.
Beggars,
that's right.
beggars can't be choosers.
Right.
But now they're back in a spot where, Willie Castro's a lot of things, but he ain't a starting center fielder. Austin Martin, a couple years from now, maybe he is a starting center fielder. But I don't even think he's looked good in left field defensively. I've been sort of surprised. I'm not trying to say he's a disaster, but I've been surprised by how not good he's been in the outfield. And, we've seen Margot, I don't think he looks good in the outfield either. So, unfortunately, we've seen the difference between Buxton and a non-Buxton center fielder a lot over the years.
Yeah, of course.
And really, last year was the only time where there was not much drop-off, if any drop-off. I mean, I thought Taylor was excellent
defensively.
And the numbers supported that for the most part. But this year, we're back in a situation now where even a somewhat healthy Buxton is just going to be so clearly an upgrade defensively over what they have, and then you hope that frees up some of the center field fill-in options to play left field, which they're fine in left field, if not good in left field. But obviously,
Well, I think
Buxton has to stay healthy.
They had the same philosophy this year as they did with last
They
year.
just had no resources.
They didn't have any resources, and also they just messed up that evaluation, right? They acquired the wrong guy.
Although I don't know who they were going to acquire for $3 million or $4 million
Well,
late in the middle of spring training.
Yeah, that's fair.
I mean, they were talking to Michael Taylor during spring training.
You're right.
And
he ended up signing for $4 million.
Same as Margot.
Yeah,
same money as Margot.
Right.
But that was 2 weeks after they had signed Margot.
Agreed.
Or traded for Margot. Right. My understanding is they checked in with Michael A. Taylor like every couple of weeks all offseason. He was into coming back. I don't know what the price was, but I'm assuming he wanted $6, $8, $10 million, which is what the speculation was early in the offseason. And I think if the payroll hadn't been slashed by $35 million, they probably would have just given him that. They sure as hell would have given it to him once spring training started and they didn't have anybody else.
Sure.
But my assumption is they probably offered him something close to the $4 million that they ended up budgeting for Margot.
Sure. And
rightly or wrongly, he turned him down. Now he ended up taking that same deal basically from Pittsburgh, but the timing on it is the difference.
Right, of course.
And we should also note, by the way, he hasn't been good at all for Pittsburgh.
He's not.
He had a good first 2 or 3 weeks, and he's been horrendous offensively for Pittsburgh.
Yeah.
I'm sure he's been his usual self defensively. I haven't really looked at the numbers, but I mean, he's got a 500 OPS also for Pittsburgh, and that's with a hot start.
Right.
So that wouldn't have necessarily fixed anything. It might have fixed things defensively, which has been the biggest issue.
Well, it was this last week. Yeah, right.
But I would say, what would, before these last 3 games, when they've been terrible defensively, just sloppy, what would your assessment of their overall defense have been for the first 40 games, basically?
Passable.
But not good.
No.
I don't think.
No, but passable. We haven't said the words outfield defense on this podcast, and we talk a lot. 3 times a week we talk.
For the first 3 quarters of the season, Buxton was in center field.
Well, that's true.
And
that's true. He's only really been out for 2 weeks.
Right. Yeah, a little more than 2 weeks. Right. Yeah. So I was curious about that because, that's sort of, I would say, matched my impression, which is there weren't a ton of plays you could point to until this Yankees series where it was like, ooh, that really cost them 2 runs, or that's the game right there. But there also weren't a ton of plays where you said, or a ton of games where you said, man, their defense was awesome tonight. Yeah. Like their defense saved so-and-so's ass. Right. Joe Ryan, Bailey Ober, they should thank the there weren't a lot of plays like that. Yeah. Especially other than Buxton made a few plays like that. But infield defense, even corner outfield for the most part. Catching defense has actually been probably the biggest strength of the team. I mean, Vasquez hasn't hit at all. But
Correa has been great at short.
Yes, Correa is solid at short, although he's even made a couple of errors. But I looked up, because perception's one thing, eye test is the other thing. Sometimes the numbers can help that. Because I wanted to say it am I nuts? Is my perception and yours similar? Yeah. And there's a lot of ways to look at defense. You can look at individual positions. You can look at runs saved, runs added, that sort of thing. But the big picture, what do you want a defense to do? And this is going to sound super simplistic, but it's true. A defense's job, if you're ignoring the catcher, because their job is way more complex, all you're really asking a defense to do on the most base level is when someone makes contact with the ball from the other team. Right. Is it an out or not? That's it. Yeah. When the ball's in play, no matter where it is, unless it's hit over the fence, did you catch it or at least throw the guy out at a base? Or did it drop somewhere? Whether that's an error, a hit.
Balls in play is the denominator, and the numerator is how many times do we turn that into an
outs,
out.
Basically.
Yes, right.
And so I looked those numbers up, and what I found was 2 things that I think certainly match our perception, but maybe even paint a worse picture. And the last 3 days are part of these numbers, but that didn't affect it. That no matter how ugly the last 3 days, it's still, what is that? It's 5% of the season or something like that. They are dead last in batting average on balls in play as a pitching staff at 310 roughly, which means when the ball's put in play against them, when they don't strike a guy out, opponents are getting a hit 31% of the time. Now the league average is 28.5. So they're dead last in that. Now pitchers play a part in that too.
Sure.
I mean, if you're just getting hammered as a pitcher, it's a lot harder for the defense to turn your balls in play into outs.
Sure.
So then I looked at expected batting average. So they have the third lowest expected batting average, not batting average on balls in play, just overall that includes strikeouts, batting average in the league as a pitching staff. Okay. And they have the fourth highest actual batting average allowed in the league. Huh. So there's 10 spots there basically, or 9 spots, whatever that is, that of difference. And I think certainly there are better, more in-depth ways to break down this defense, and I might do that for Mondays when I'm writing Monday. But at the very least, I think you can say they've not turned as many balls in play into outs as you would expect a average or above average defense to do. Now, how much that's hurt is another issue. How many big moments versus, just start an inning and they get out of it or whatever. But I don't think they've done the pitching staff any favors. And then another way you can look at that is look at like field FIP or XFIP or something like that, or expected ERA that takes the pitching staff and kind of removes defense from it. And then you compare that to their actual ERA, and it's about a half run higher. Their FIP and all that stuff is like mid threes, high threes.
And their ERA is
slightly over 4, basically, I think. So that to me, there are better ways to do this, but that to me kind of would suggest that the defense is below average, which I think we both would maybe get to, but might be a little bit worse than even that. And I guess I would say that the outfield component of that, which we talked about like a half hour ago, those add up more quickly, I guess, than... Because the funny thing about outfield defense is fly balls get turned into outs at a much higher rate than ground balls.
Of course.
But when they don't get turned into outs... They go for extra bases. And that's why a fly ball pitching staff, which the Twins have and have had basically for the most of the last 30 years, can look great with a good outfield defense. When it was, Jock Jones, Torrey Hunter, and whoever in right field, and you play in a somewhat spacious ballpark. But when you put a bad defensive outfield out there and you're not turning those fly balls into outs 80% of the time or whatever, they start to add up pretty quickly. And so I think that's my worry, although Buxton should address that for as long as he's healthy. But yeah, it's sort of something to watch. And it's something also when you find yourself trying to evaluate pitchers, starting pitchers, relievers, whatever, that's a factor. Like you can't fully evaluate a pitcher independent of the defense if you're going by kind of traditional numbers, because some teams are getting, 73% of their balls in play turned into outs, and the Twins are getting 69%. Right. Well, that might not seem like much, but that means 2 hits every game, basically, or 1 hit every game at least, and so 1 extra hit every game. So I think that's been maybe an under the radar factor here is sloppiness, yes, like we saw in the last 3 games. Right. But even when it's not like abundantly obvious, I just think there's been a lot of plays where it's like, oh, they just got to that. And Castro's had a lot of those plays over the last week or so, where it's like, I don't know if that was a bad jump or if Buxton would have gotten that. But it seemed like he just didn't quite, get to the spot that you'd want him to get to. And Martin, the same thing.
I'm just taking a look sort of a position by position. I don't feel like Santana's been bad at first. I don't feel like Julian's been bad at second. I feel like Correa's solid at third.
Third base
at short.
Third base has been rough.
Third base has been a little bit rough, but we've not so much that I've been like, oh God, there's nobody playable over there.
No, I think it's mostly corner outfield and then lately
in right field. I felt good, and for the most part before this series, I didn't feel. It potentially. First of all, Buxton was in center field, like you said, for the first 6 weeks of the year, or first 5 weeks of the year.
Yeah, although he played about
that's true
2/3 of the time.
That's true. That's true.
In center,
mostly like the one position I can look at and go, yeah, left field seems like
left field. I think has been a little.
I didn't.
I should look when I get home. I'll look. That won't do the listeners any good. But left field has been, I think, horrible. Because think about Kirilloff has not been good. Wallner wasn't good. Margot has looked terrible a couple of times out there.
Yeah, that's right.
And so,
that's fair.
Maybe we're overreacting. That's probably the least important defensive position at times on the field. Mm-hmm. But we see it add up. And then I think you toss in the fact that center field hasn't been particularly good post Buxton, and it kind of, it mounts on itself, or it compounds, or whatever.
Well, it would be something to keep an eye on. I'll be interested to see if I could start noticing hits that I didn't think would be going to be hits.
Well, it's tough too because it's like there's a confirmation bias there too. Like if you think the defense is great, you're going to say, "Yeah, that wasn't catchable." If you think it's terrible, then everything should have been caught. You know, so that's why I like to look at the numbers and try to. It's also why if we're trying to find somebody at AAA to step in here. I'm not saying they can't use the offense, although I think Kersey can provide some offense against right-hand pitching, certainly. But like if you have a guy who can be a huge upgrade defensively, maybe we roll with that for a while. Yeah, I'm not trying to start a Deshaun Kersey fan club here, but
because it sounds like it.
Yeah. Some charter member. Trying to think who else would be.
Seth is in it.
Well, Seth is the fan club of every minor leaguer.
That's true.
Every minor leaguer.
We got a contingent of Twins Daily writers who are big Deshaun Kersey fans.
Seth is still in the Tommy Watkins fan club from when Tommy Watkins was a player.
Sure,
like Seth is still thinks he should get a shot.
You can't blame him for that.
No, Tommy Watkins is a lovable guy.
Exactly.
He's the mayor of Fort Myers.
That's what I understand.
We want to do. I want Dan Hayes to do a story on Tommy Watkins that just goes through his phone and ranks the 10 most famous people in his phone. And we asked Tommy Watkins, and he was like, "Oh, that would be a good list," but I don't think he'll share it with us. So, let's see a couple other notes, and then we can probably STFU.
You want to talk Wolves?
I don't want to jinx. Last time we talked Wolves, they lost 3 in a row.
I know.
I will actually.
We'll talk about the Wolves on Monday.
Only tangentially related to the Wolves. Bigger point about sports, I think. We talk a lot on this show, and part of it is because the Twins haven't won a World Series in 30 years and have barely won anything in the playoffs for 30 years. But so you're going to lean this way if you're a Wolves fan or a Minnesota sports fan in general. But what we try to kind of get across to people is if your enjoyment of sports is entirely tied to the end result of the season, first of all, you're going to be miserable a lot more than you're going to be happy, particularly in Minnesota sports, but just in general.
Sure.
If you need your team to reach the Super Bowl or better, well, that ain't going to happen very often unless you live in Kansas City.
It happens once every 30 years. You win it once every 30 years, maybe, right? But beyond that, setting aside like your happiness or anger at the end of the season, I feel like that approach, and certainly a lot of people have that. And I'm not telling you how to be a fan. I'm just saying I feel like people are missing out on. For me, the ride is the fun part. Like, you know what I mean? And I think you're the same way. Yeah. And as I was watching the Wolves just blast the defending champs by 50, last night. Right.
And I thought, well, it's one of the greatest things I've ever seen in my life. And I'm a day one Wolves fan.
Right. Yeah.
I've been a Wolves fan for 95% of my life.
Such Pooh Richardson and Doug West,
Randy Brewer. We can get worse than that. Todd Murphy. Right, Gerald Glass. I can make a grown man cry with this.
Gerald Glass.
I mean, I was at the Dome for the first game. I've had season tickets as a kid. I mean, like, I'm a Wolves Bobo. I can't. No matter, they were awful for 20-something years. I couldn't 30 years. Anyway, my point is, you're watching that last night, and I thought, if you're the type of person whose fandom can't let you fully enjoy that because you're thinking, well, if they lose in Game 7, it doesn't matter. Well, I'm going to be sad if they lose in Game 7 also.
Right.
But if that, we talk about being like pre-miserable, but if all your happiness on the ride to something is contingent on the final result,
right,
I don't think you can enjoy fully the ride with it. And so as I think about the Twins, and I think it's certainly even more true in a 162 game season than in an 82 game season, but it's true in basketball too, for sure. The fun of the Twins is like an 18-4 stretch. And if you sit there and watch them win 6 straight series or win 12 games in a row within that, and you're like, well, yeah, but I still don't think they're going to win the World Series. I was like, man, I don't know if this is for you. Like, what? You're not. Look,
you're not giving yourself much of a fighting chance of having any happiness.
And look, if that makes you happy as a sports fan, I mean, more power to you. Like, I don't care. Be whatever kind of fan of whatever you want to be.
Right.
I'm watching old wrestling highlights all day when I'm at home, so I'm not picking on people for. But I just think like what a shame it is if you can't watch a Twins team go from 7-13 and flip the switch and win 12 in a row,
Right.
and just think, I didn't really enjoy that because like I still don't think they're going to win the World Series. Or you can't watch them blast the champs as the Wolves by 50. By 45 was the final, but they were up 50 at one point. Right. And you can think, well, I still think they're going to lose in Game 7. Well, so what if they lose in Game 7? I mean, that's gonna suck. That's independent of what happened in Game 6.
Right.
And I did think we've talked a lot about that as it relates to the Twins. Obviously, like the ride is for me. That's the fun part. And if the end result is also great, if you get to the ALCS, if you get to the World Series, if you win a World Series, whatever it is, if they win Game 7 on Sunday, well, that's even better. But that's also part of the journey to get there. Like to me, it is about the end result.
I wonder if those people in the middle of a movie go, I just want to skip to the end and know whether or not they're going to be happy or not.
Becky reads the Wikipedia.
I need to know how it's going to end first. That's the thing about sports is you're not going to know. As ever, people were talking about the ticket prices for the game last night, where it was $100 to get in yesterday at Target Center when I woke up yesterday morning, versus $250, $300 to get in, for games 3 and 4.
Right.
And I pointed out, there's a reason I was able as a 23-year-old to afford to go to Game 6 of the 1991 World Series. It was because they had won the first 2 and they'd lost the last 3. Right. And everybody was going into that, and it was cold out. It was so cold that day. And, we paid, I think, $200 for 3 tickets to get in and see and sit in the second row from the top.
Is that when one of you 3 fell asleep?
Yes. That was when Kim fell asleep.
I wasn't going to name her names. This poor woman.
She fell asleep and woke up in the middle of the 10th inning. Just in time.
What a way to do it.
Just in time.
It's really funny
to see that blast, right? And, that's... I think we think back... we talked about this during the win streak. We think back to that 1991 team and think, we knew all along they were going to be...
No one knew a damn thing.
Nobody knew a thing. And we thought... Nobody believed in Game 6 that the Twins were going to win that game. Right? And then, Kirby hits the home run, and it's a magical moment that everybody's going to remember. And people think that was predestined. Right? That the 15-game winning streak showed everybody and made everybody believe. No, it didn't.
Right.
I was there.
Right.
We didn't know what was going on. We were...
Of course. And I think a lot of it also is, especially in Minnesota, it's a defense mechanism, I think, a lot of the time. And I get that, where it's like, if I never expect good things to happen, I can't be that sad when bad things happen. But I don't even think that works. I think there's no evidence in the personalities of people who care about Minnesota sports. They're more miserable than any group of people could ever be. If that's a defense mechanism, it ain't doing much work.
Yes, that's right. That's right.
And so... Look, I'm not telling you I'm the most cheery guy. Anybody who's listening to the show knows that. But all I'm saying is...
I do love that this is coming from Reverend Gleeman.
Yeah, Reverend Gleeman.
How to enjoy your life and be uncynical.
John 420 over here. But I guess what I would say is, like, if you're not letting yourself enjoy the good things on the way or the good parts of the journey to the 100%, capacity. If you're just sort of in the back of your mind saying, I don't get too high with this. Over the season, I agree with that, especially in baseball. Don't get too high, don't get too low. But look, if you're watching a walk-off win and your first thought is, man, I don't really care. They're probably going to not get to the World Series. Or, obviously I'm only talking about this because of what I watched last night with the Wolves. But, like, to me, I will always remember last night, whether they lose by 200 in Game 7 or they go on to win the championship. Now, I'd like to remember it as part of a championship run.
I would too.
But, I mean, I'm going to never forget being at the Wolves-Kings 20 years ago. Did they win a championship? No, they didn't even get to the finals. That Garnett crossing over Weber and dunking on him with like 4 minutes left. I almost crapped myself. I'm not going to forget that as a 20-year-old kid at that game. Like, it didn't matter what came after that. I feel like what you want to be as a sports fan, or at least what I want to be, I'm not going to talk for anybody else. You want to enjoy those moments to the maximum effect in the moment. And then you're going to hope that the destination is so good that it amplifies the moments you've already enjoyed even more than that.
And the downside of that is you might be a little more miserable than you would have been when the losses come. Like in Game 3, Game 4, you have to maybe feel that a little more than you want to feel that, right? But I'd still take that over just never enjoying
just being
anything.
Dead inside. And first of all, that's what makes life worth living, right? Like, but also, I think people tell themselves that, and I've been guilty of that too over the times. If you always expect the worst in anything, but in sports, let's be specific. The Wolves blow them out and they win Game 1 and Game 2 in Denver. Everybody's all hyped up. If you're the one guy at the office saying, "Oh, they're still going to lose the series," well, yeah, maybe. And if that happens, you can you can act like a genius, and you can also internally tell yourself, "Well, I was prepared for the worst anyway, and so when it happened, I didn't care." I don't think that's how the human brain works, because I don't think there's any evidence of that actually affecting people's behavior in Minnesota. I think they get the worst of both worlds, which is they
can't enjoy the good stuff.
They can't enjoy the moments, and they got to crap on other people's fun in the moment. Right. And then when bad things do happen, and Lord knows bad things have happened in Minnesota sports, and they might happen Sunday, who knows? Then they're still just as upset. They're just as angry, and it almost adds to it because they're like, I knew this would be bad, and it's bad. So, yeah, I don't know. Look, be whatever kind of fan you want to be, but, man, I feel sorry for anybody who couldn't watch that and even, apply it to whatever aspect of the Twins you want to. And couldn't think. I went to bed last night thinking like, that's one of the most amazing things I've ever seen.
Right.
And if they win Sunday, it'll be even better. Right. But as a standalone
I thought Game
moment,
2 was the craziest I've
this
seen.
whole series is just such that's kind of why I wanted to talk about this. Is like this whole series is such an example of that. Of like these are three of the greatest moments: Game 1, Game 2, and Game 6 in the history of the Minnesota Timberwolves. And you can laugh at the history of the Minnesota Timberwolves, but it's true. And if you've been a fan for 40 years. What are you being a fan if not for that? And so, yeah, I don't know. I try to keep that mentality with the Twins. It's harder, but you're only going to win a World Series, maybe once or twice in a lifetime, if that.
Right.
Unless you're a fan of, go be a fan of the Yankees or the Dodgers or whatever. Right. Unfortunately, it's not that easy. Right. I don't think that would really. I'm trying to think of you or me, but especially you. How long and what level of devotion would it take? Like, let's say the Twins had been contracted in, what was it, 01 or whatever?
Right.
Was it 01 or 2000?
Between 01 and 02. It would have been after the 02 season. Between the 01 and 02 season is when it was happening. Right?
Think if the Twins would have been contracted, I think a lot of the fans would have just been like, I'm done with baseball. Right. But let's assume you hadn't been, and you'd become a fan of whatever.
Okay.
Brewers, I don't know what the hell you would have. Phillies, you would have become
probably.
A fan of.
Yeah.
I don't know that there's any amount of time or level of devotion, realistically, that could get you back to a place where your fandom of whatever that new team was. Like 300 years later.
Would I ever have been as big a Phillies fan as I was a Twins fan?
But because I don't think you can trick your brain into that. Do you know what I mean? Like there's some connection that's made when you're 8 years old or whatever that you can't trick your brain of that.
Sure.
And so I have friends who have our friend Dana that we mention often. Sure. He was so frustrated by being a Vikings fan that like 4 or 5 years ago he said, I'm just going to become a Buffalo Bills fan.
Right. Yeah. By the way, not necessarily the franchise you would trade for.
I think that was part of it. He didn't want to become a
He didn't want to become a
49ers fan or whatever,
a Cowboys fan.
Yeah, who would want to do that? So yeah, I don't know. I don't really have a huge point here, other than to say, if you found yourself not diving into the pool fully last night, it's understandable.
Sure, yeah, we get it.
But God, isn't that the point of the whole thing? Like, isn't the point of fandom to care enough about this? It's stupid. It's pointless. It's just pure entertainment. It's sport. I mean, nobody pays more attention to this stuff than we do, and my livelihood revolves around it. I'm not saying it's pointless in that regard, but you boil it down. We're just watching a bunch of guys play a sport. Like,
that's right.
But if you can't watch them win 12 games in a row and go, God damn, that was something that I just watched, because in the back of your mind you're saying, oh, it doesn't mean anything. It was against the White Sox. It's like, I don't know if that's the way to be, and I almost feel bad if people can't or won't get past that. Now, check back in with me about
I was about to say
7 o'clock Sunday.
I was going to say Monday we're going to be doing a Patreon podcast.
Yeah, we'll see.
The Twins will have had a 3-game series versus Cleveland, and the Wolves will have played a Game 7 versus Denver, and see if Gleeman has the same. Is whistling the same tune.
That's relevant.
On Monday morning.
That's a good point. But actually, this is sort of in a way making my point, which is that my enjoyment of last night, of Game 6, of blowing the absolute doors off the defending champions and the best player in the world. In this moment, the next morning, or last night, certainly, and probably tomorrow, and probably, early Sunday too.
Sure, right.
If it just let it flow.
Yeah, right.
And you're going to be disappointed, but I got a secret to tell you. If I was sitting here today and going, yeah, I didn't really, I watched the game, but I didn't get that excited because I still think they're going to lose in Game 7, I got a secret for you. I'd still be sad when they lose in Game 7. I just will have cost myself caring about Game 6. So, all right.
We will be back on Monday with a Patreon, patreon.com/Gleeman.
Might be a Wolf show. It might be. I might be retired from sports.
It might be. We might be switching to become Cleveland Guardians fans at that point. We'll see.
Well, let's not. I'll be a Cowboys fan before that. I'd be a White, and then I wouldn't be a White Sox fan before.
No, absolutely
you'd have to
not.
Lose a couple brain cells and
grow
a mullet.
Where would Cleveland rank in terms of like teams you could switch to and root for?
Well,
I think they'd be in my top 10.
That you could switch to and root for? Oh, Lord, no.
Really?
Nobody in this division would be in my top 10.
Well, you like Major League. One of your favorite movies.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, if they want to re-sign Tom Berenger and Charlie Sheen.
If Bobby Uecker switches over there, gets young and starts doing the broadcast again. Right.
Lou, the manager's not available anymore, but I mean, okay. I mean, they're going to be higher up on the list than the Yankees.
Renee Russo, was that who the love interest
wants
was?
to get back involved. I haven't seen a lot of these people in a while, but we'll put them through the casting process again.
Thank you to our sponsors. It is Factor and Hatch and Soda Stick and Game Time.
And if you want to listen to that Monday show, where you can hear me backtrack from all these things I've said and say that sports are pointless and anybody who enjoys them is a fool and all these things. Or you can tune in Monday and it's me and Krasinski talking Wolves and John's in the other room.
That's fine. I'm just listening.
I said to Becky last night, I should have done a Wolves podcast with Krasinski. And she said, what would that be? Krasinski and the Geek? And I thought, ooh, good bird. Monday, Patreon, Patreon, patreon.com/Gleeman. We'll be doing episodes next week, probably, Monday and Wednesday?
Wednesday. We'll have another free show Friday. Krasinski and the Crab.
Okay.
Something like that.
Now you're just insulting. The Krasinski and the chubby, balding mean guy.
Krasinski and the Crank.
Yeah.
I like that.
Crawn, we'll figure it out.
Bye-bye.
Gleeman